Hello, everyone, and welcome back for the last time this season. I'm McKenna, this is John, and we are your specialists for the evening. We're talking Survivor Season 44, the finale, but in the past. So we're going to take a look at some finales past, and John, how did you enjoy this finale?
Finales are always a really weird thing for me to evaluate when it comes to Survivor, because most of the time they're the most uneventful episode in the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
They, and I kind of feel like this one is like no exception to that. Everything was pretty predictable. We knew what was going on. Sure, there was a little bit of a like wrench thrown into what you think predictability might have been when we came to the final four, but everything kind of played out as was to be expected, maybe except for what the final vote total was.
Mm-hmm.
But like overall, like it's still a decent finale. It would be really interesting to kind of just look at Survivor finales and kind of like rank them to see how interesting each of them are, because I do find that they're just these elongated episodes that don't have a lot of strategy talk because so much of the time is consumed by the challenges, by tribal councils, and it's just really interesting. In the end, though, like this is a fine cap on a fine season of Survivor.
Yeah, I like watching a final tribal council on the first watch, the second watch maybe, but as we're going into our Patreon content, we're watching the finale of Token Chains. I've watched this several times, so it gets boring to watch a final tribal council, and that does take up the majority of the episode. So I get it. Finales are kind of boring, but maybe that's the off-season content, John. Who knows?
Maybe. But in the end, like what it comes down to is like finales are so hard to look back at from a historical standpoint too. Like for us this week, it's hard to relate some of these moments to things, especially like in a new era where things are a little different. We have the things we're going to talk about tend to be more recent events in Survivor history rather than like old school Survivor stuff, because the format of everything's kind of just changed just enough where a lot of the older things that would happen in a finale don't happen anymore.
Yeah. So let's just dive right into this episode. We open up with an idol hunt because one was played in the last tribal council. And this idol hunt kind of only really resonated with us with the Island of the Idols buff idol hunt that was going on here, because in these last 40s seasons, it's been a challenge advantage and not an idol that people are searching for. So we don't see that this go around. We don't see that challenge advantage come into play. So we really liken this to the Island of the Idols scramble idol hunt.
Yeah, it's similar. It has the bare bones of the same thing, right? Like switch to a new island. It's a final five. They're looking for everything. The big thing I really think I prefer, as much as I like hate saying this, the thing I actually prefer the Island of the Idols idol hunt because it was a hunt, right? There were clues to follow. It was fun watching like Tommy and Dean having to find like the red board, and like Tommy can't find it because he's colorblind, and then they find the symbol together and they find it on the mega shelter that Rob supposedly built for them and everything. It was just very different than just watching these people walk past a tree with an idol in it over and over again.
Yeah, and this was, I think it was because of our surroundings for watching this idol hunt, because we had a crowd of people going, oh, like it amped up the moment even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the beauties of Survivor and watching Survivor with a group of people, or just like a collective in general, is that you get those moments where it's like exciting because you don't know what's going to happen. And there were parts during this finale where I wasn't sure if someone had found this idol or not, right? Like going into this tribal council after this, I wasn't sure if anyone had found it, but it had those moments of like suspense, which was nice because a lot of finales kind of don't give you that. It's just weird because like an idol being introduced at Final 5 is so rare in Survivor because it's the last time an idol can be played. And it's actually really funny with what you said about it being put into play because of the idol being played last round, because I don't know if you listened to it, McKenna, but on Jeff Probst's podcast prior to the finale, he said there were no rules as to when an idol gets replanted.
I hate that.
Yeah, okay. I know.
I hate that. We're moving on now. So we're going to go into the challenge, and we're not going to talk specifics on this challenge. We're going to kind of just talk about what we got this episode for our Final 5 challenge and what we have gotten before in a Final 5 or
penultimate
immunity challenge. So what we see in Tocantins, the episode we're covering over on the Patreon, is this giant massive web, or we see the stations. We see, it still can end in a puzzle because they have to like cross this plank bridge to grab a bag of puzzle pieces, do this, that, the other thing. It's usually something like huge, crazy, busy, and a little bit more complex. And we see everybody just in their lane doing everything that they need to do the 3-tier obstacle course, with the pole key slide, which we are going to mention just this one. The pole key slide, it was an actual pole. It was not a piece of bamboo. Thank you, Cody, from last season. With the monkey fist to the ladder and then the jigsaw puzzle. These were all like common elements that I would have been fine with had it just been a little bit more grandiose, like a little bit more flourish. I love a good stationed challenge. I think the blind feel your way through the maze challenge is great. So like, give us something like that, something to sink our teeth into, where it's not as straightforward and it's like less, you can see some progress less, maybe.
This is probably, I think this is the first time in Survivor history where I felt a challenge really was like this far cry from what it used to be. Where, like you said, like historically, these penultimate immunity challenges tend to be these big, grandiose obstacle courses with multiple stations, people collecting puzzle pieces, because that is, in the end, what this still is, right? When we get down to the nuts and bolts of this challenge,
it has multiple components. It's just linear instead of do whatever you want.
Yeah, like there's less choice involved, there's less strategy involved, and like, okay, this one will be harder to get to, but if I get it out of the way first, everyone else is going to be slowing down on it, doing it later, right? Like there's no strategy involved when it's just go up ladder, grab puzzle pieces, go down ladder, grab more puzzle pieces, right? Like the thing that I found really weird about this one in particular is it just felt, from the explanation, it sounded much more bigger. It sounded much larger than it actually turned out to be. And we've seen this like multi-tiered get the puzzle pieces type maze thing before in Caramoan, right? Like this is essentially the Caramoan penultimate
I also
challenge, right?
I also want to say Worlds Apart with the lighthouse puzzle was also multi-tiered as well, where Mike wins. Yeah, we've seen this, but it was literally just untie 3 gates. This seemed more of a tribal element. It closely resembles something we've seen a lot in the tribal phase.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, McKenna. And I think a lot of it, you know what I think it came down to?
It all seems very tribal. Everything here seems very tribal phase, and they slapped it into individual.
I think like one of the things that really gets me with this is I think one of the things in those, I keep saying one of those things. I'm sorry, listeners. I'm just on a bit of a tangent here right now, but with these penultimate challenges that are very large, it's the colored stations that I think really help differentiate a lot of it, because that's the progress we see, right? We can tell progress by when someone goes to a station, how many bags are left, things like that. And one thing I really noticed in this finale, this entire scene was very beige. Like this entire challenge just felt, because it was just made of bamboo and everything. There was no like color differentiation or anything like that.
Yeah,
It felt
just had
very
different, like,
bland.
lane colors, yeah.
Yeah, like it just felt bland because of it. Like just such a minor detail that I don't think we pay attention to very often in Survivor. But if we look back at these other challenges, there's a lot more color involved and a lot more vibrant. This just wasn't as appealing to look at as some of these bigger structures that they've made in Survivor history.
Yeah, I think about San Juan del Sur, where they have these giant steps, but the staircases are painted in that like turquoise and orange color, where we have it in the tribal colors and the theme colors, and it is this like stations challenge with the physical, like, climb these massive amount of stairs, the people lapping each other. Like, it just feels more intense. And this puzzle seemed very easy to get to, where we'll go into it more deeply on the Patreon, but JT wins that puzzle because he's faster at the physical portion. Aaron had that puzzle on lock. So it's like the physical portion didn't matter in this case. It all was the puzzle.
Well, and that's the interesting thing too, because like we're in an era of Survivor where we talk about the puzzle being the great equalizer, and I think we just saw a season where it was anything but an equalizer because someone was so proficient at puzzle solving. So
granted, I am very happy it was a jigsaw and not an Evie hack or a hack, that Carson has 3D printed a puzzle like the fire or what have you. So like I am happy that it was just a basic jigsaw, but still it's not, and you can't like make challenges equal for everybody, but like something like that Carson is going to get really handedly, where I feel like the spiderweb puzzle in Tocantins I thought was a great equalizer puzzle.
Yeah, and despite the fact that we kind of get like this unique approach to the puzzle from Carson, because with a vertical puzzle, it's very hard to do what Carson does here, where he builds the outside first. It's a risky move. Clearly it pays off because he wins, and that's the way a lot of people just approach jigsaw puzzles in general, right? You build the edges, then fill in the middle. And you just don't think of doing that with a vertical puzzle.
Yeah.
But the fact that Carson applied that technique to this vertical puzzle, like it showed a lot his confidence in puzzle making, I think. But I think this is a puzzle that if you give it to everyone, like they're going to feel confident enough in solving it.
Yeah.
But someone who does puzzles more is still going to be able to do it more better just because of the technique.
And especially if the physical isn't equalizing the puzzle skills. Like I feel like there needs to be a balance of, yes, the puzzle can be a great equalizer, but the physical aspect of the challenge also needs to be challenging as well, because Queen Michelle, specialist Queen Michelle, she was last in the challenge, and then all of a sudden builds a puzzle, crushes it, kicks it over. Like the physical portion still impacted her puzzle time.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing, is like, I don't know. This just felt like a really underwhelming penultimate immunity challenge to me.
Yeah, but let's get to the reward. So we have Carson winning, and he gets a feast, and he can bring one person with him. And this very much reminded me of China. With Todd and Amanda, and then the other three going back to camp. This just felt very China vibes. Like, I know we had it in Island of the Idols, because Nora was excited for her mushroom burger, but this is just felt very China-esque with who was chosen.
Yeah, I totally agree, because Carson chooses someone who's his close ally here, and it's obviously a very interesting situation in which Jeff is very definitive that like you only get to take one person with you, which is not the usual way these reward challenges go. Usually like you're like, okay, you won reward, now you get to pick someone. But Jeff was like very definitive. You get to take someone with you when you win this reward. It's extremely similar to China with Amanda's win, right? Like, and it's a late game reward challenge, and late game reward challenges have come back to bite some people when it comes.
It literally is the same thing. Like, granted, Carson did not make Final Tribal Council, but like he took the winner, gave the winner the food, but and also being a part of that, you know, a 3-person alliance who came in like undernumbered, and it's just like crushed the game. So it was just interesting, the dynamic of Carolyn being left, Courtney being left. And so obviously there were talks, the 3 women back at camp in both scenarios. Like it was just very eerily aligned.
Yeah, and I don't know. There's a lot of discussion about like what's the right move here. Maybe Carson is supposed to take Lauren here because it makes it so that like there's no chance of anyone like flipping on Jam Jam. Really, like Carson doesn't care. He has immunity, and that's the weird thing about
he was
this.
taking Carolyn.
That's the weird thing about this specific challenge, is that this isn't just a reward challenge at Final 5 where people have to make decisions. This is a reward challenge attached to an immunity, and the immunity win makes it so that you can kind of change the way, because like a lot of the time we talk about in the end of Survivor, like we've talked about it with like the letters from home and stuff earlier this season. You don't want to win those type of challenges, right? Because you don't want to alienate people against you. In this case, obviously Carson wants to win this challenge. It's immunity. And it's just the fact that the immunity comes with the reward as well makes it so that it's like so different. Like, yes, we have these parallels in like China when Amanda takes Todd, or like other previous seasons where we get into these late game rewards and people are like picking and choosing who you're going with. Yeah. But it's different because Carson doesn't have to make the same type of decision because he has immunity. So no matter what, it's not like he's creating an instance where by taking Jam Jam, one of his closest allies, he's making it so that people are going to vote him out because he's outnumbered back at camp, right? This is him being like, hey, I can take whoever I want because I'm safe no matter what. And especially with like this being a new era season where you don't even have to worry about like being voted out the next round. It especially doesn't matter who he's really taking here, where in previous seasons it would matter.
Yeah, so like let's talk about that. So we're going into the Final 5 Tribal Council now, and the Final 5 Tribal is the last actual vote that you get in the season, but it's still not an actual vote because you have to think about idols and advantages as well because some expire at 5. So we don't have that genuine raw vote anymore because of the fire making twist. I'm okay with idols expiring at 5, but give me a vote at 4. But we don't get that anymore, and that is like the new era ever since this fire making twist happened.
Yeah, I mean, from a historical standpoint, the worst part about it is that the last genuine vote at Final 5 was kind of taken away from the people in Heroes, Hustlers, or Heroes, Healers, and Hustlers because they didn't know about the fire making twist until after that vote happened, right? Because in all honesty, in Modern Survivor, you tailor your game to the fire making challenge because you know it's coming, right? You know that at Final Four you're making fire, so your vote order is really determined on how to get there, right? It's not as important. It's like, because if you have someone who is a big challenge threat, let's say, right? So someone like Danny, right? Like we see Danny go home the week before this. And that's right? Danny went home at 6, right? I'm not making this up in my head.
I, for some reason, thought you were talking Danny McRae and was like...
You gave me a weird look, and I was really concerned that I got the boot order wrong. But
no, I was just thinking you were talking about Danny from 41, and I got confused on where we were going.
Although Danny from 41, also relevant to this conversation. Because those challengey people, you take out earlier in the game now. Because there's a chance that like they do just pop off the win at Final 5, and they get to make fire, and they could keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the fire making challenge is a big twist to the game, which we'll get to in a little bit. So now we'll get to the Final Four immunity challenge, something we are tired of seeing. I mean, what? We're talking Simotion. So put the ball in the contraption, it twirls around, it comes in the left shoe or the right shoe, and there you go. So we see this in 8 seasons, including this last one, and it starts off in Token Jeans, which we're watching over on the Patreon, become a patron, with JT. And what's actually fun about this challenge, and something Jeff pointed out in Winners at War, when the challenge is properly run as an individual immunity challenge, the winner always goes on to win the game. So Token Jeans and JT. South Pacific was a duel, and that was Christine Shields-Markowski. Cambodia, Jeremy won it. Ghost Island, it was a reward, but it was huge, and they were doing with like massive spools. And it was Dom and Wendell. Then David versus Goliath, we have Nick. And then Winners at War, we have Natalie Anderson breaking that run.
Yeah.
Then we have Romeo and Heidi in 42 and 44.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, when it's not the reward challenge that was in Ghost Island, every era since the fire making has been a thing, the winner of Simotion has not won the game.
Yes. Though I think I like this challenge in the fact of it keeps the concentration aspect of the very first hand on a heart idol, where you have to keep your wits about you. And it is that like calm patience challenge in a crazy game with the craziest stakes, because it is the last challenge that you can guarantee yourself in that final. So like I like this challenge, but it's just gotten boring, and I like the spiciness of the Ghost Island one.
I love this challenge. I love Simotion. I think it is one of the harder challenges because of the way spacing works in it. Because I think the correct strategy for Simotion is the hardest thing is placing your third ball, because you have to place your third ball while thinking about your fourth ball rather than thinking about it as a third ball. Because a lot of people, I think, would make the decision to like equally space out their first 3 balls, but then you can't equally space out your fourth ball. So it has that strategy to it, which I really enjoy, while having that concentration aspect, right? While having that, if you're in the zone, I don't think you can lose Simotion. If you are in the zone, you are just thinking so straight. I think you have this so well.
It's
in the bag.
impossible for me to think straight.
Happy Pride,
everyone.
but I agree. Like the variation we see in Ghost Island is nice. It's different, right? I mean, we haven't really talked about Australian Survivor a lot, but Australian Survivor has also done this. Australian Survivor's also done this, where it's like on a larger scale, and it's like running upstairs, so it has like an endurance aspect to it as well, right?
But I believe they also did it on the smaller scale. And
Yeah.
I liked that we got some narration through it from the castaways in the Australian season, being like, or afterwards. Like, I like that we got a little bit into their heads on this challenge, because we can't. It's like we have to let them play out the challenge, and then, you know, that's it. We can't talk to them. Jeff can't really antagonize them during it, because it's a very focus driven challenge. But I wish I got more from them talking about the challenge and their experience on either winning it, how they just lost it, you know, and the when they decided to place a ball, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the more interesting things about it too is like in Cambodia, for instance, where they got a practice round before they ran the challenge, and Kelly Wentworth killed it. And then, of course, Kelly Wentworth's like the first one out when they actually run the challenge afterwards. Like, it's really interesting hearing those type of stories about sim motion, but that's the story that we have to hear after the season, right? Now, and looking at this immunity challenge, because like you said, you're kind of getting bored of it. Did you know since fire making, we've only had 3 different final immunity challenges?
Since fire making, or since 40s?
Since Heroes, Healers, and Hustlers, we've only had 3 different final immunity challenges.
I honestly haven't noticed.
It is sim motion, which is probably the one that like everyone kind of thinks of. It is the using the fork to like place the cups through the thing, and it is the placing the letters, the letter balance one from Heroes, Healers, and Hustlers. Man, Triple H. It's from Triple H.
Damn, like I haven't really noticed, because it started to become like staple-esque. Like, I'm expecting the letters.
Yeah.
Because they want another HHH moment.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And it's just very interesting, like looking at that is what we've come to. And as we were talking earlier about how like these massive penultimate challenges with the obstacle courses and stuff are like the staple of Survivor, these final challenges have become the staple, right? Just like in the earliest seasons of Survivor, we had, you know, hand on a heart idol or some variation that was
the dishes.
Yeah.
Or the marble.
Yeah, right? Like there are only so many final immunity challenges we've had. And it's not until you actually really start going through the seasons that you start seeing how similar they all are.
True. Yeah, I think it's just they have those aspects, like the final 4 or the final before final 2, whatever the final immunity challenge is going to be that focus driven challenge.
Yeah.
Where the one before that might be the more grand challenge kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have fire making, right?
Yeah.
There's so much talking about fire making.
So, okay. So I'm just going to spew some facts and we'll talk about them. So we have Ben and Devin making fire for the first time, and it was a surprise. Chrissy gets her reward for winning the immunity, and it's this. And she's like, all right, Devin, you're going to go into fire because Ryan sucks. So you're going to make fire and try and beat Ben to get into that final 3. And then Devin breaks his flint and he's just like, well, I'm going to do it there. And it's like, oh, didn't want to practice. Okay. And then in Ghost Island, we have the Malolo curse that has seeped throughout the episodes and lands itself in that orange fire-making flag. And we see that here. And I was like, oh no, whoever's in the orange spot is going to get screwed, because now we always have that like orange curse in our head, because Angela lost because Wendell was supposed to be there and he was like, nah, can I be in the purple spot? Tommy with hiding his fire making skills and convincing Nora to take him. Chris Underwood giving up his immunity to make fire. Natalie losing Winners at War because she didn't make fire. And then Gabler with the record time that Heidi just crushed. So we've had so many different iterations of fire these days, which I'm kind of happy about, that it's not just like so cut and dry. We've had someone win from making fire. We've had someone be brought to the end and win, and we've had someone who won the immunity challenge win.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Heidi giving up immunity and making fire and losing the game, we've finally hit every possible iteration with fire making.
Probably.
And we're finally at a point where, at the end of 43, everyone was kind of up in arms because it seemed like Gabler winning fire was like the big reason why he won. It wasn't, but it was part of it for sure. Or like how I think there's a lot of emphasis on Natalie not going into fire, losing her Winners at War. I think that's a different case completely because she was voted out of the game, obviously.
Right.
And there was a lot of fear of like this blueprint that Chris Underwood started by giving up his immunity and making fire and then going on to win. That was a move Chris had to make because he was voted out of the game, right? There was a move Natalie had to make because she was voted out of the game. And did it cost her the win? We'll never know for sure, but it definitely cost her some votes. Seeing Heidi do this, I think it just really feeds into this mentality of like big moves in Survivor. It's kind of like, and I think it comes a lot in this season. A lot of it came from Jeff, where Jeff was really talking about big moves and like being flashy and stuff like that. I don't think Heidi clearly, like with like 2020 vision of like being able to, know how this ended. Heidi didn't have to make fire here, right? She could have gone there, and because making fire got her maybe one vote, right? So it's not really that big of a deal. It's interesting. It was really interesting because at the finale party we were standing with around Dom, and Dom was talking about this, like having to give up immunity as someone who didn't give up immunity to make fire, right? And so seeing that, it's just so interesting seeing the different ways that this works out, right? Maybe Heidi was in a lose-lose situation anyways, because if Carson doesn't go and like, if Carson still loses fire, like who cares? Jam Jam still wins, right? If Jam Jam goes, does Carson win then? Because like there seemed to be a lot of talk about Carson winning.
Right.
It's just so interesting that we finally got into this point where fire making after, I'm doing math in my head right now, and it's not going well. What is it? 9 seasons? I guess it's 10 now, right? Yes, 10 seasons. After 10 seasons of fire making, we're finally kind of at a point where it's like, okay, this isn't doing what it was intended to do, right? Which was like make it so that the big challenge threats can get through to the end. It's done that. We can acknowledge it did that in HHH when, Ben did it to get to the end. But since everyone has been able to adapt to it because they know it's coming, like I said earlier, you vote those people out earlier. So it's not doing that anymore. And it's not even this big way of like showing how to win now.
But I also love the subtlety of Tommy Sheehan being like, I'm going to show you my move that I just made, convincing someone to bring me along at Final Tribal Council. Like that subtle move is a big move in itself, where it's like, we don't need you to give up immunity, but tell me why you were dragged there and why I should vote for you. And he's like, see, I wasn't dragged. I was convincing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will give Heidi credit here. This did show Heidi's read on the game really well, I think. She viewed Carson as a threat to win. A lot of that stems from the fact that, like, there are a lot of things we didn't see in this season, and, like, I kind of harped on the edit about this season a lot, but, like, in Exit Press, it came out that Carson was incredibly close with Jamie and Lauren, and, like, they kind of had their own 3 alliance as well. So knowing that, like, this is Heidi's read of the game, where Heidi's like, okay, Carson has all these friends, so he's probably likely going to win, but I know I can beat him at fire. So I can do that and sure he's out. Whereas you look at like the other threats and everything, it's like, okay, but if I put Jam Jam in there against Carson, Jam Jam's beating Carson, right? Like anyone could beat Carson. So it does kind of make sense for it to be Heidi to do it. But at the same time, that's not what this jury was looking for. And while she has the awareness of the game at the end, it's almost like futile because it's just not what this jury's going for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So after fire making, we see Carson sadly leave the game. And I have just one little issue here before we get into FTC, and that's freaking breakfast. Like, they get a boat drives in, and they're given a table with all the food, and I'm like, where is the food just slapped in tree mail? Like, this is where I had a big issue with this, and it's something so tiny, but it's not what we're used to. We're used to them cooking their food on the fire. You see them cooking the bacon, what have you, and talking about this day 39 breakfast. But now they're just like, here's a table, here's the food. All right, we're gonna move on to Final Tribal Council. Okay, goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of weight in making that final breakfast. I think it's different when there are rewards throughout the entire season. I think in a new era, this is essentially another reward. It's not just like here's food, congratulate yourselves. Like, it's not a moment that you're just sharing with the people you're there with. It's also a congratulations, you made it. Here's a reward because you've had like 3 the entire season.
Yeah. But anywho, we're going to go on to Final Tribal Council, and it was basically like no other Final Tribal Council we've had before. So we're just going to talk about what we have had before and what we got this time. And we've had people attack certain people. We've had champions be in the jury for certain people that are in the finals. But this jury was just all nice, and they were all like asking everyone questions. Nobody was iced out. Like, it felt very inclusive and very warm and welcoming and like not intimidating to sit at a Final Tribal Council. And I honestly loved it. I thought it was great because they were taking into account everyone's game, what everyone is saying, and really weighing it, because this is a big decision and it shouldn't be. It felt very much like they were taking the game into account and not because I'm bitter and they voted me out, or they voted me out. That's a huge move. It was, they gave everyone the open forum to explain themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's so different. And like, this couldn't happen in the original jury format. And I think that's a big thing to mention. Like, this can only possibly happen in this Game Changers afterwards jury format, whereas like the open forum, because I think if you, and to be fair, we have to know, especially because like Brandon wasn't even shown asking a question. We only see a portion of Tribal Council, and we can only comment on what we see. So there could have been tough questions. There could have been people coming after each other. It's not the vibe we got. I highly doubt that's what happened, based on just like, I mean, meeting this cast and everything and like knowing how they interact with each other. But it's so different. We're not used to this. We are not used to at least one person being so egotistical that they want to know why they were beaten out of the game. There's nobody who's like just like mean for absolutely no reason. Right?
You took my time with this person.
Like we're not getting anything like that.
Matt was booted, and then Franny was booted shortly after, and Franny didn't make the Final Tribal Council, because we might be seeing another Ozzy Amanda situation.
But even like, we're not even, and we don't even have any of like the weird out there questions with this, right? It's there's a lot of like rumblings and rumors that like it feels like in the new era because every single season since 41 has been a 7-1 vote. 7-1-0 vote. Sorry.
Yeah.
41, 42, 43, 44, all of them 7-0 or 7-1-0. And like I know there was a lot of speculation on Twitter afterwards that like, okay, is the jury just like talking it out who they want to win, who they want to come second beforehand, before final tribal council, and that's how they're voting? Because like, how else are we getting these exact numbers? I like to believe that is not the case because I am a huge proponent of final tribal council matters.
Yes.
And I think we look at this final tribal council, we have Jam like very elegantly explaining everything in the game. You have Heidi jumping in and like interrupting, which isn't a good look in final tribal council, right? You have Carolyn kind of like talking through her game and talking through her emotions and everything like that, but not really connecting it to game moves at all. And I think that's like really important. And I do think that like Jam did have the best final tribal council out of these three. But it does feel weird that it's just like 7-1-0 always in this era of Survivor.
It is. But that is pretty much our takes here on 44. John, what are your overall thoughts on this season as a whole?
I'm a lot lower on this season than a lot of people are, just from talking to them. I love the cast. The cast was phenomenal. They're all really fun. They are great people. And I'm really happy we got to spend a season with them. I'm lower on this because of the edit. I wanted to see more of these people. I wanted to see more of them in game senses. Like I want the fact that we didn't see Carson, Lauren, and Jamie connecting, like total miss. We like didn't see Lauren at all this season until like right before she gets booted. And even then, we're not really seeing any of like her strategy, how she's approaching the game, what she's thinking. Jamie got clowned on this season. I was very disappointed by that because apparently she was this huge social threat, and all we saw was her talking about this idol that never even came to anything. Like it wasn't even relevant to the season. So I have it in my bottom half. I have it like pretty low, in all honesty, like in my Survivor rankings. I won't like officially put it in a place until I rewatch it again, but overall, I was disappointed not because of the cast. I was disappointed because of the editors, because they could do better. I know they can do better, and even like with what we were talking about today with like the finale and like that penultimate challenge and everything, like they can do better. Production can do better, and I look forward. I really hope these 90-minute episodes next season do that. I hope we get more of those camp moments. With another stellar cast, because the one thing I have to commend Survivor on, their casting has been significantly better recently. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. I echo a lot of your statements. I think yes, the editing could have gotten better. Some challenges could have been better. I'm a big challenge gal, so I want to be wowed a little bit and like great callback on some oldies. Love that, but it was just some things were a little bit lackluster, and I do think the cast was phenomenal and the gameplay was phenomenal. But that's all from us here. We will be over on the Patreon for the Token Seasons finale. And also we have a bunch of other stuff coming out soon. There might be a new series over on the Patreon, so look out for that. It is my girlfriend and I rewatching some of the Survivor seasons. She's not a new fan, but she doesn't remember a lot of facts and things from certain seasons. So we're rewatching all the seasons, then recording a podcast for you all. So whenever Phil decides to drop those will be over on the Patreon. And yeah.
Yeah, John? We have there's more stuff. There's some secret things in the works. There are some rumblings of things that we're going to get out. The movie buffs, we finished our top 100 right after the finale. Flew back from New York, literally walked in the door and recorded that #1 podcast. We're taking a bit of a hiatus right now, just while we've been doing 100 movies for the last 2.5 years. Like we need a little break, but we're coming back huge in July. On July 24th, we are starting our journey. Phil's first journey through the MCU. He's watched 4 MCU movies so far. We are watching those in chronological release order. So we are starting July 24th with Iron Man. And the other half of our episode, we're talking about a new release movie. So July 24th, we're talking about the Barbie movie. Like, we're in for a great series. Next series, I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be really interesting seeing Phil, who dogs on the MCU so much but hasn't actually watched it. It'll be so interesting to see how he actually thinks about these movies while he watches them. Plus, we're going to be getting out and seeing new movies over and over again. We have so many just already planned out that we're going to watch, and it's going to be great. Looking forward to sharing that with you. Keep an eye on social media, on Twitter, Instagram. You're going to find out when things start dropping on Patreon. You're going to find out when things start dropping on this channel.
Yeah. All right, everyone. We will hopefully see you for another season of Survivor Rewind.
Bye.